Today we find ourselves in a moment of opportunity, not one to waste on nostalgia or sentimental dithering, but one to seize for the reformation of America. We've just been ushered out of a crisis in leadership, a crisis marked by cowardice, confusion, and compromise. And now we stand at a fork in the road. Will we settle back into political drift, or will we raise up leaders worthy of the name?
The leadership we need today cannot be half-hearted. It must not be allergic to conviction, nor enamored with optics. We need men who lead with righteous resolve, men who compel others to follow, not because they pander, but because they stand. In short, they will hold the line, not for power's sake, but for the good of man and the glory of God.
Joining us today are two men who are no strangers in this fight. Nick Solheim is the Chief Executive Officer of American Moment and host of the Moment of Truth podcast. He co-founded American Moment in 2021 and brings experience from both the tech world and public policy. From leading startups to founding the Wallace Institute for Arctic Security, Nick has consistently fought for a future that prizes competence, courage, and clarity. He lives with his wife Evie and their two children in wild and wonderful West Virginia.
Dr. Jared Longshore is a husband, father of 7, and a theologian who practices what he preaches. He serves as undergraduate dean and fellow of theology at New St. Andrews College, and as associate pastor at Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. A veteran pastor since 2007, he holds an MDiv and PhD from Southern Seminary and is the author of Wisdom for Queens and Kings, Strong and Courageous, and the Case for the Christian Family. His most recent book is titled The Men We Need. He's one of the clearest voices calling men to reject passivity and reclaim responsibility. And now, to our conversation.
We the people of the United States, in order to fill their purpose, that can be done. For ourselves and our posterity, we will
Well, here we are with another episode of Kings and Statesmen. We have a couple new guests on the show. We have Dr. Jared Longshore, pastor of Christ Church. We have Nick Solheim, the CEO of American Moment. And of course, our hosts, Lennox, Kalifungwa, myself, David Shepard. So thanks, gentlemen, for being here. We really appreciate you guys being on today.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Let's just jump right in. Nick, tell us about yourself. Tell us about American Moment, what you guys are envisioning with American Moment, how you got to be in the position, and yeah, just talk to us about the program.
Yeah, so I am the CEO of American Moment, and basically what we do is we are identifying, educating, credentialing the next generation, basically building the shock troops for the conservative movement, trying to get politically aligned personnel into a lot of these roles between the administration, on Capitol Hill, and allied institutions like nonprofits and private businesses. So we've been doing that for about 4 years now. We've got 4 different academic, I've actually been getting texts nonstop today because we have academic programming running all day today on Fridays. So we've got all of these programs, and basically what we are doing is we are credentialing the next generation of staff that are going to move the right forward. So yeah, it's been very exciting, and I was working on, before we started American Moment, I was working on all the Arctic stuff, so trying to buy Greenland and getting funding for the Polar Security Cutter program and that sort of thing. So that's how I got into all the political stuff.
Cool, man. How did you come to be CEO of American Moment, and what was your background before?
Yeah, so before, I guess, rewind a little bit. So I went to a small private Christian liberal arts school in Minnesota called the University of Northwestern St. Paul. It's not nearly as cool as New St. Andrews College. I dropped out after a year and a half. Started a web and app development company based in Minneapolis with a couple of guys. who had graduated from that university a couple years before. So did that for a number of years. We grew the company, and then I opened our office in DC in 2018, and started working on all the Arctic stuff around the same time. So was doing that, and then I got a call from one of my co-founders at American Moment, Saurabh Sharma, during COVID. It was like March of 2020, and basically pitching the idea for what would become American Moment. You know, we had this huge problem with personnel in the first Trump administration. You had a lot of people who weren't ideologically aligned with what the president had campaigned on in 2015, and in many cases were also not competent to do the job. And so with all the hubris that some young 20-somethings can muster, I was like, yeah, we can fix that. So we had 3 co-founders at American Moment. We launched it in 2021 after working on it sort of underground for a year. And we all worked together for the last 4 years, and then I lost about half my team to the Presidential Personnel Office in the White House. So I was Chief Operations Officer before, and I decided to stay out of the administration because I think the work that we do at American Moment is essential and must continue. So that's how I became CEO. We lost a lot of our best people to the White House, which
that's a good problem to have.
Always a good thing. Yeah. Always a good thing.
You mentioned something that I think is kind of at the crux of what we're trying to accomplish here. That mission-aligned individuals. So it's a really good feather in your cap that, you know, a lot of individuals from American Moment went over to the White House. They're working there. But that's really the goal of what you guys are trying to do is find the right fit for the administration and finding individuals that are capable of being mission aligned. What is it about the relationship with New St. Andrews that is a unique situation in finding students here that fit that criteria?
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with Dr. Merkel about this last night. The thing that has been so gratifying to me having students from NSA come and participate in our programming and then helping them get their first job in DC is, look, I've taken people into our programming from over 100 universities at this point. The people that I get from NSA are definitely the hardest working and probably the most intelligent. And so it has been great to have some of NSA's students in our programming. I truly believe in what you guys are doing here, and I think that many of the best people that we're going to get in DC over the next 10 to 15 years are going to come from this school. Mm.
That's a really great plug for the college, and it's good to hear that.
You paid me to say that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, not much. Jared, you could. I would love to hear your perspective on what the college is doing with students in order to prepare them for moments like going to DC and taking in a first internship and eventually their first job. What is it about the character building at New St. Andrews that's inherently unique?
Well, when you think about DC politics, what kind of person is going to go and engage in that world? At least, historically, those were going to be the elite of society, those who would be steeped into liberal arts and humanities, which is what NSA is about. The modern conception is, you just need somebody that's good at politics. You need a guy that, he doesn't need to know Latin. He just needs to know how to get the deal done. He needs to know the art of the deal, that kind of situation. What's interesting about the recent vibe shift is the shift seems to be toward highly competent people, okay, which I'm very interested in. You have Elon doing his thing, sending rockets into outer space. You have Trump with all of the common sense executive orders and actually having people that can get them done, that can press them to get them done. So the competency shift is very interesting to me. A question in my mind is it going to be a competency enhancement within the pragmatist paradigm, within let's just be pragmatists, let's do the good American thing and get the job done? Or will there be a recovery of those who have feet that are thoroughly on the ground and can be practical, but also are steeped in Western civilization. So the art of hitting that right is really hard. And usually institutions drift into very pragmatic entities with good chains to get people into positions and to get people into, whether that be the business sector or whether that be in politics. Or they know a lot about Herodotus and Thucydides and they've read Chalmers, but they're not doing anything. They're just like, they're poetry guys or whatever it is, And right now, the energy is competency and practicality, but we all know that there's no way forward unless you actually recover the heritage of our fathers, even the founding fathers. I mean, go back to all the Adams quotes that people love, the Constitution is for a moral and religious people. It's wholly incompetent to any other. And all of the other founding fathers and what was going on there, they were thoroughly Christian. And many of them were the elite of society that were downstream from the Western civilization. So I think NSA is actually well positioned. We're kind of known, Moscow is known for being people that are interested in cultural shaping.
Right.
So that's very well known. And then they get here and they're like, wow, I mean, and your students do 3 years of Latin, 3 years of classical language, so they're actually sitting down and conversing in the language. We had the privilege of having Theo Wold out here last year, and he was really emphasizing this point. He said, look, there are, he said, basically, I think he went to Old St. Andrews maybe, but he said, I was steeped in the great books, and he's like, people are not reading them. So they just don't read them. So colleges that are even known for saying they read them, they don't read them. And so he's like, he was commending NSA on the fact that we actually do read the great books. You're going to have to read through the entirety of City of God, the entirety of Herodotus' histories, the entirety of Thucydides, the entirety of Bede's ecclesiastical history. And I could go on and on with the kind of great works of Western civilization that you're going to be acquainted with,
Right.
that you're actually going to work through, and mix that with that whole practical emphasis. I think NSA is well positioned to engage in the political realm with that kind of background.
Yeah. What does that do for a young man that is, kind of still in that formidable part of their life, trying to be established, maybe perhaps did or did not have a classical education? When they come to New St. Andrews, are they, by year 4, are they ready to be shot out there? Do you feel like it's a rigorous enough education that you're very confident in the students being able to go out into DC and have a solid foundation?
Oh yeah, I think so. I've heard Dr. Merkel say this before. I can't remember what field this guy went into. NSA, we happily admit that we have one track. It's liberal arts and humanities. So we are not into the kind of natural fragmented education that people are accustomed to. And there's a heavy lift to get people to buy into this, to see it. Where you're used to specialization. You know what I mean? You come and say, these are my gifts. What can I get into? But the older model, like the pre-modern model, was institutions existed to form and shape you, right? Not to be platforms upon which you could express your individual identity, or be even equipped for your specialist job training. It wasn't specialist job training. It was an institution that was going to form and shape you. Now, I want to readily admit the downside of that. You come out of NSA and you go and do a master's in business or something. Those other guys are going to have more business classes in their BA than you did, right? You go into politics. If somebody did some kind of bachelor's, particularly in political studies, they're going to have more politics classes to check off, and they're going to be ahead of you. But because you've been steeped in the tradition, I'm going to say, give me 6 to 8 months at that master's level, or 6 to 8 months on the ground in DC, and you'll be ahead of those other people because you've had this training. You can learn those particulars of the job. That's what American Moment. NSA is not American Moment. NSA is not trying to train up the next generation of people that are going to be sent out into government positions. Right. We're very happy to partner with institutions that are doing that, and basically send you that great chunk of meat. You know what I mean? Like we're the butcher. We're going to send you a great chunk of meat, and then the guys that know how to cut it and trim it and get it ready. That's what American Moment's for.
Yeah. Right, I was going to ask, what does that specifically look like, Nick? As students are coming into American Moment, what's expected of them? What are they likely to experience?
Yeah, so the way that we usually look at it is we're sort of pre-selecting for, similar to what Jared was saying, we're pre-selecting for that ideological alignment in the raw talent, right? So there are a certain level of things that are teachable and a certain level of things that are not. My general view on accepting people into our academic program is I don't want to be spending the entirety of a curriculum convincing someone to believe something. I want to take those sort of raw institutional first principles that they have and mold them through the competency aspect and basically show them how to get things across the finish line. So most of the academic programming we do is focused on like hyper-specific policy areas and how we can get some of these things done. So as an example, one of the lectures that we have going on today is specifically on the H-1B visa and some of the ways that a lot of these foreign companies, are basically being the middleman for American companies and taking advantage of the immigration system, and then how it's negatively impacting American wages and also it basically turns into, at a lot of these large companies, a form of indentured servitude for the people that end up coming here. And so it's very hyper-specific, programmatic, focus on those issues and what we can actually do about them. And again, like that sort of core principle in the ability to take some of these things that you learn and actually do them is something that you can't teach. And so, you talk about the vibe shift, a lot of what we're actually assessing for when we're interviewing somebody for the first time is you're getting a vibe check. You're getting a vibe check on, why they believe what they believe and what they're actually going to be capable of doing. So one of the examples of something that we have on our application form is if you were policy czar of the United States for one day and you could do one thing that would last forever, what would it be? And there's a lot of like standard fare stuff. People say, we'll get rid of the income tax, or I would do X, Y, and Z. The things that really interest me are the ones that are really creative. So I get very intense policy suggestions on trade, ways we could realign our relationship with foreign nations. But then I also get things like, the one that sticks out to me is we had this one guy who said, if I am paying for a toll road, I should get to drive as fast as I want. That is like my policy proposal. And it got him an interview, and then ultimately he did great in the interview, and then we took him. We're looking for that, sort of creativity and the desire to do things that people have not previously talked about. So a lot of what we're doing in DC is honing in on that stuff. It's the sharpening that we're really focused on.
I jump in there to say to demonstrate a way that what we're doing at NSA pairs with that kind of approach. You mentioned H-1B visas. So 2 points. Freshmen at NSA take a class called Lordship, which is basically a theology and worldview kind of class. They take music, they take Latin, and they take rhetoric, and they take that all year long. And then our rhetoric students will debate each other before the whole student body once a term. So 4 times in the year, you're going to have a debate over some topic. But I teach that freshman theology class, and we read Augustine's City of God. It's like 1,000 pages. You work through it the whole year. And toward the end, Augustine has a whole section on what constitutes a nation, which is a huge question underlying a lot of the public discourse about, obviously, immigration, H-1B visas. And Augustine actually gets down to giving you some solid answers about the nature of justice and the reality of a nation, the ontology of a nation. We had students go through that, and then our last, what we call a declamation, which is the last debate that the students had, was on H-1B visas.
Yeah, I got together actually right before this with one of the students that was arguing for my position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we
Nice.
were talking about the
Nice.
declamation and
And
everything.
if it's the one I'm thinking about, he killed it. I mean, it was just great. But watching them, and at times, we're big fans of making them. The majority of the time, you're actually defending the position you hold. But it is interesting to make them, now choose the position you don't hold, and let's see about your perspective. Like, can you actually steel man your opponent? Mm-hmm. And if all you do is steel man your opponent, you're a liberal.
Right.
Okay, so like you can always see all perspectives. Eventually, like, tell me where you stand. But 10% of the time, if you learn to actually get that perspective, and I know the best arguments that are going to come from the other side on this issue, and therefore I'm already going to obliterate them in my argumentation. So a lot of that came out in that H-1B visa debate.
That's fascinating. So Nick, I did an internship with my college when I was a young man. UCLA, ended up going to DC, did an internship on Capitol Hill. From what I'm hearing from your process, it sounds vastly different than what I experienced.
Yeah.
You folks do paid internships, is that correct?
Yeah.
I also notice even in the interview process, you folks have a whole specific, like, you're looking to have creative young talent.
Yeah.
Mine was very much based off of GPA, letters of recommendation, that sort of stuff. What else sets you folks apart from other internships, other college programs like the one I experienced?
Yeah, so the program that we're really known for is this, it's called the Fellowship for American Statecraft, and basically what we do is we prioritize on the under-credentialed. So people who didn't go to elite universities, people who maybe didn't go to university at all, or people who are working in a totally different career. We've taken dental assistants, welders, teachers, that sort of thing through this program, and basically what we do is we pay them $3,000 a month as W-2. They get retirement benefits for 12 weeks. They get a $100 a month networking stipend and a gym membership. And we place them in an internship either on Capitol Hill or in the administration or at a nonprofit for 4 days a week. And then they spend all day on Friday getting basically indoctrinated by us. And we have a whole book of about 200 lecturers that we end up going through every year. And the ultimate goal of the program is to get everyone in the fellowship a job by the end of the 12 weeks. So we do this 3 times a year. I have 7 fellows in this spring class. We're on I think it's week 8. 6 of them already have full-time jobs, with 4 weeks to go. So it's a very fun program, and I think the thing that's different from a lot of the other institutions in DC that do this sort of thing is that we're selecting for that sort of ideological worldview. So an emphasis on trade, immigration, and foreign policy, and then we're looking for the talent and people who otherwise would not have an opportunity to get their foot in the door. Their dad's not a donor, they didn't go to the right school, maybe they're unless they come from NSA, maybe their GPA wasn't that high, whatever. I don't really care about any of that stuff. I didn't have the right credentials when I moved to DC. I don't have a bachelor's degree. And so we want to make it possible for the right people who really have a passion for this stuff, who believe in the same things that we do, and have the capacity to actually do the job, and bring them to DC. And frankly, there's nobody else in DC that does that.
Yeah, I mean, that's so incredibly refreshing to hear, because I think that DC is probably, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most overeducated parts of America, where the average probably individual has a master's degree, right? And it's
also the most mediocre, by the way. Like, they're the most educated and also the most lame at the same time. Like, not imaginative, not hard workers, not right. Like, I'm speaking generally, like there are exceptions to the rule, but seriously, like, these people are lame.
And what do you mean by that? Like,
so, I mean, by and large, they have not experienced the kinds of things that normal guys like us have experienced. So, like, the big reason that I dropped out of school was because I was poor. I was working 4 part-time jobs. I was getting like 4 hours of sleep every night for a year and a half. I was trying to do all those compressed summer courses to try to get done as soon as possible. And people in DC haven't experienced, the adverse effects of the policy that's made in DC and the general rules that are made in our culture of the things you have to do.
Absolutely.
And so there's not a real motivation to like change the system for these people. They've in many cases have had a lot of these things just like handed to them, and so they're just not. They've never been in a situation where it's, hey, if I don't figure this out, there are adverse consequences. And so there's a real. Actually, let me give you this example. You know how you go to basically any city in America and you go to a Starbucks 7, 8, or 8 in the morning, and there's always long line, right? Because everyone's getting their coffee before work. They're going to be in their desk, at 9 or maybe earlier. The Starbucks on Capitol Hill, a block and a half from the Capitol building. You go in there 7, 8, 9 in the morning, nobody there. They all start showing up at 10. 10 is when everyone starts ordering their coffee and they start rolling up to the office. So it's very, it's not like New York where it's like work hard, play hard. It's like DC is mostly play hard. There's not actually a lot of, interest and desire to, get in there, get some dirt under your fingernails and get stuff done. And so it's actually made it pretty easy for us to get some sort of cachet for recommending people, because in many cases, like, we're providing the only people that are actually gonna, they're gonna be the first in the office and the last to leave.
That's great. And that kind of ties into a broader theme that like Trump ran on, right? And it's the fact that DC is detached from reality. It's a swamp. It's filled with these creatures that have just kind of created this own massive leviathan. And right now it's really unrecognizable for a lot of individuals. When they read the Constitution, when they read the Founding Fathers, you take a civics class, you're like, I have this idea of what our government should look like. And then what you just described is like antithetical to that.
No, yeah, it's like totally, it's a totally deracinated version of the American idea. Like, it's basically our entire country, right, is built off of dudes just saying, yeah, I could do that, and going and doing it. And DC is actually
dudes like this.
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
get a little plug
look
there.
at those guys.
Yeah, and then
Man
look
for
at the
job.
back. Are you a man child?
Right.
Are you a mere man child?
Right.
There are a lot of male children in DC. That's definitely the case.
On that note, Jared, so this is your latest book,
Yeah,
hot off the press.
hot off the press.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I wrote this because of this interesting vibe shift. And I didn't actually know. I mean, I'm still hopeful there's some guys getting up at 5 in DC, at least a small cohort. Or the American Moment guys.
We're training all of them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, because I mean, that spirit, the way we are really a nation that's built because guys just say, man, I could do that. And that's why I love this picture. I mean, it's like lunch over New York or whatever it is. These guys, literally, my son's looking there like, did any of them die? And I was like, I have no idea. But there's a salt of the earth, kind of redneck chewing tobacco, but also really smart. Like there's that sweet spot of what I think a great man is. That I thought it'd be good to tap into that. So you have kind of the recovery of manhood, probably over the last, I don't know, it feels like 5 years now, where guys are starting to try to act like men. And then you have like the silly, boyish man-child version of that through all the manosphere, the masculinitots, as you can find in one of our NSA ads. But then even finding that there are guys that, I grew up in a culture like good family in the South. Dad was a contractor, worked hard in school, that kind of thing. I don't know what's appealing about Andrew Tate. I don't. When I see guys go for it, I'm like, I feel like they're aliens to me.
Right.
But that's like, I'll take that's on me because I don't understand just how bad the manhood situation is. Like people did not grow up in families, did not go hunting, did not work hard outside in the summers, and therefore they actually are yearning for what it means to be a man. Right. So I thought I'd jump into that conversation with this book, Man for the Job. I basically write as an uncle to a fictional nephew named Leo. He was a neighbor back in Florida who was like the coolest guy, and all my kids were like, you should make the nephew Leo. So dedicated it to the real nephews, and I am coming at it more ideologically. So the whole thing is, what kind of men do we need in order to actually get the job done in front of us of recovering our commonwealth, of recovering our nation? I think this most recent instantiation of what I've called the new right, what Nick doesn't like to call the new right. Nick just calls it conservatives, which is cool with me. Own the center. But there's clearly a new instantiation of that conservative impulse, because these guys are actually more like this than I think if you were to rewind the clock 15 years. But they're also all under 30, you know? And I mentioned this, I mean, I'll dote on Nick. I've known Nick now for a little while, long enough, and I'm shocked at how young he is and how influential he is. And I'd say part of that's because he hasn't dabbled in what some of the young disenchanted people have done. He's had the spirit of just go get it done, and a high intellect and a big motor. And that's kind of what I'm aiming at here, but I am coming for certain ideologies in this book. I want men to actually understand why things are the way that they are, and then have the intellect and the grit to fix it.
That's awesome.
I tell people this all the time, actually, that the best job I ever had, and the job that I learned the most at, was I worked on a hog farm for 6 years.
That's it, man.
Basically everything I know about work,
Yeah.
I learned from working on a hog farm.
It's all there. That's the way it was with me. I mean, it was every summer, my dad would swing hammers in the Florida sun, as a general contractor, just build houses, build spec homes. So you basically just kind of do it yourself, and you can contract out the crane to help you put the trusses on, whatever. But 3rd grade through 10th grade, every summer, just out there with them, just grinding. And you learn everything about life. You know what I mean? Men need that, those kind of quick responses. There's no way you could be some kind of postmodern leftist person when you hit your thumb and it immediately hurts. You think, well, that's not the way. It doesn't work that way. There is clearly a certain way this is going to work.
Well, yeah. So for 6 years, I did the hog farm thing, and then the other cool experience I had was my last 2 years in high school. My dad worked as a hydroelectric engineer on a dam. And I got to work with my dad every day for the last 2 years of high school. And I learned so much from my dad, just through conversations you're having, not even the technical stuff, just conversations you're having working with your dad every day,
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's what shapes and builds cultures, is fathers pouring into their sons.
Absolutely. I was going to tap into a little bit of that. It does seem like there is a shift with a new generation. Jared, you're a millennial. David,
oh, boomer! I'm old enough to be a boomer. Wow.
You're spiritually a boomer.
But I'm a zoomer. You got to understand. I'm with my kids. I'm that thing. You got that Riz. You know what I mean? Is that what they say? Is that what they say?
Okay, boomer.
We are so back, baby.
Yeah. Statistically, it seems like Gen Z is a very conservative generation, especially among young men. I know the young ladies seem to be drifting further left. Young men seem to be drifting right. And there's a lot to be optimistic about there. Nick, I'm just interested to see what you've observed in line with that. I think in many ways you fit that bracket and mold as well.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? What gives you hope in young men today?
Yeah, I think there's sort of been this return to the mean in terms of, we've spent the last 10 to 20 years, beating up on young men. There's all this talk about male-dominated spaces and patriarchy is fascism and all of these things. And so guys have been told actually all of the problems that we experience in society are your excuse me, your fault. And I think dudes took it for a while. And I think there's sort of been a snap back where it's wait, we're the only ones that can solve our own situations, and also the situations in our households, in our communities, in our states, and in our nation. And so there's sort of this innate God-given desire, right, for men to do great things. I've seen guys post this exact picture on Twitter and say, I wish that were me, you know? Guys want to be a part of great and in many cases dangerous things. It's an innate desire. And I think young men are sort of like sick of being beaten down. They want to get back to the sorts of things, you know, in our generation, I think our fathers were, you know, beat up on too in a certain sense. This is where you really start to see the growth in, you know, women entering the workforce and that sort of thing. Like my dad is almost 50, but I look back at, you know, my grandfathers, and it's like, that's kind of what I want to get back to. Like my dad's dad manufactured cement culverts in Crookston, Minnesota. It was in a union, did that job for, you know, over 40 years. And it's, you know, I look back at that, even though I'm doing really cool stuff in DC, and sometimes I'm like, I wish I worked with the same guys for 40 years, man. Been in a union, like that would have been cool. And so I think there's kind of been this snap back to where guys are starting to look at the things their dads and their granddads did and said, I want to be like those guys. Or in the case that they don't have those guys, they see it in other people and they want to be the kind of man that their kids and grandkids want to look back at and think the same things about.
That's so good. I want to take this conversation a different direction, but still kind of on that same line. I mentioned how women seem to be drifting further left. Is this a crisis for the young men in terms of finding potential spouses and that want to build, and specifically build a family, love a wife, raise children? What's your assessment of that?
Yeah, I think I personally, you know, speaking about my own personal experience, God blessed me. I was not thinking about the question that you just asked when I met my wife. I got extremely lucky when I met my wife. But I think the thing that I've noticed, you know, in terms of my experience, and then you know, the experience of a lot of the young men that are getting married around me, has been that you know, women are very not necessarily like politically engaged in the same sense, right? So you know, my wife, when we first met, she was a reporter at Fox, and she still writes stuff and is very interested on reporting like very facts-based things, but she had not spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of these philosophical and political questions. Yeah. And when I first met my wife, I was going really deep into, I was listening to like 2 or 3 episodes of Renewing Your Mind with R.C. Sproul every day. And so I remember like we'd go out to dinner and it'd be like, I listened to these, you know, 3 things today, and we would spend hours talking about that stuff. And my wife actually grew up, you know, in a house that was very anti-Calvinist, and it's funny because we're members and our kids have been baptized in a CREC church now, but there's almost a certain malleable quality when you're young, both men and women, where you can start to, you know, wrestle with a lot of these questions, and I think women are having a desire, same as men, to answer some of these philosophical questions, like what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a wife, a mother, etc. And men are struggling with those questions in the same sense. And so I think that is a very fruitful experience in DC, especially when we get, you know, folks from NSA or other schools like it, where people have been sort of classically trained in how to think about these things. And those conversations, like my wife went to Patrick Henry in Percival, and so we had very lively discussions about these sorts of things, and she contributed a lot to the conversation. But as you can tell, I'm still kind of trying to figure out, because DC is there are not a lot of young married people, and so I've limited experience.
Sure. That's actually an interesting dynamic here. How do you, the fact that DC has, to a great degree, a sort of treacherous landscape, how do you try to equip young men, young women, the people who are interning with you to navigate those kinds of things, if at all? What does that look like?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time early on in our academic programs and in our relationships with people. Like if someone's already in DC and they've come into our network and maybe we're gonna recommend them for a job down the line, we spend a lot of time talking about these sort of intangible things. So you're at a networking event. How do you present yourself? How do you talk? How do you talk differently to a man that is more senior than you and a woman that is more senior than you? Like that those are interesting conversations that you have to navigate. And there have been times where I've had to have conversations with dudes, and it's been like, you're creepy, man. Like
right.
these women are creeped out. You get to start acting different. Because you get a lot of, DC kind of pre-selects for nerds a little bit who don't have a lot of experience talking to women. And so sometimes you got to have those difficult, conversations. And so I think a lot of it centers around what is morally right. So I don't have this like in our founding documents per se, but this has always been our personal preference at American Moment. It's like dudes and ladies that are sleeping around or whatever, there are going to be a whole host of other red flags in terms of like vetting them and that sort of thing. They're probably not going to be a super good fit for the kinds of things that we do. And so we actually do place a very big emphasis on the moral character because that is also something that is missing in DC in a big way.
Yeah,
That's huge.
yeah, that's pretty much foundational for what is missing in DC is like, and it goes back to the John Adams quote that you were mentioning, where it's like there has to be a moral people in order for this to work, and in order to have those individuals running the government.
Yeah, I do think it's a long-term problem with DC. We're impacted by our surroundings, by our context, and DC is not a cheap place to live.
It's not.
It's not a cheap place to educate children. Right. And given the sexual revolution that you talked about and the way that we think about men and women basically as just irreplaceable entities, there's strong incentive not to get married or to delay that marriage. And so, you just have to be honest about that coming from a Christian conservative perspective. You have to say, well, the way you've ordered your own life is a certain way as you're continuing to maintain these distinctly Christian conservative family ways while still being involved in the game. A lot of people just say, well, we can't involve ourselves in the game at all because of the corruption of the swamp or because of the factors on the ground there that make it hard for families to operate. And I think that's a nut we can crack. Let's get some of that Zoomer spirit and say, well, let's figure out what we have to do to restructure. I mean, the very way it looks on the ground in DC, that we can see some long-term health. Because any entity that's really looking for the formation of these people that are going to have long-term success in politics are going to have to be considering the economic situation, the education of those kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah. What does reforming DC look like in your mind, Nick?
Yeah, I think there are a couple different, axes on which you can judge that. I think there's an ideological conversion that has been happening for the last 10 years from, basically when the president started running in 2015, it was a heterodox version of conservatism for the last 2 to 3 decades. So a resistance to free trade at all cost, a reduction in immigration, both legal and illegal, and a dissatisfaction with the amount to which the United States is involved in foreign conflicts, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now in Ukraine and in Gaza, et cetera. So there's the ideological side, and then there's the the competency side. So there's guys who can write, guys who can negotiate, guys who can communicate. And so training people on, so they've already got these ideological precepts, sharpening those. And then on the competency side, you're a good writer, good communicator, good speaker, sharpening those. Like one of the first things we do in our fellowship is the first 4 weeks we have an introduction to government writing. So it's how you write press releases, constituent letters, an introduction to how you write legislation and that sort of thing. So sharpening those skills, and then reforming the character. And the way that you achieve critical mass on all three of these things is just scale. You do it over and over and over again. So we did, our first fellowship class ever in 2021. We did it in the summer, only in the summer, and we had 10 people. Okay, we're right now looking at for next year, 2026, and we now do this program 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall. Next year, I'm going to do 30 in the spring, 30 in the summer, 30 in the fall. And so it's a scale game. How fast can you create these people, credential them, and get them into their first job? And this is sort of the way that the neoconservatives won on this question back in the day. Was like, we're just going to send National Review to everybody. Doesn't matter if it loses money. Like we're going to send it to everybody. We're going to train them. We're going to get them their first jobs. We're going to do all of this stuff. And so it's just a question of literally financial and like physical resources. Like, do you have enough people to do the training, and do you have enough money to pay the people? And then getting them their first job. It's a very simple, like A plus B equals C.
So I've had lots of local discussions with local individuals in politics. I'm vice chair of the local GOP here in Latah County. One of the things that I've talked at length about with individuals is the importance of having kind of the right person at the low level jobs at the city, the impact that could have for an entire town. I'm sure there's probably some carryover at the federal level and some of the jobs that you folks are staffing. Can you talk about the importance of what kind of shift we could see if we get these different facets of the federal government staffed with the right people?
Yeah, so that idea is right on the money. Like, what people do not understand about DC and policy making in the United States is like, you elect these guys, go serve in the House, Senate, whatever. The people that are briefing them, that are writing the constituent letters back to you, that are telling you what's going on, the preparation for going on TV, all of those dudes are under 30. Like, a lot of policy in DC is made by dudes under 30. And this is also true, say you just as an example, you go do a special assistant role, in the office of, nuclear and arms control in the Department of Defense. It's same thing, just in a different branch of government. You're
under 30.
You're briefing your boss on all of these things that are going on. You're going back and doing research on policy we made 40 years ago, and you're making a recommendation. And they're not always going to take it, but you are sort of, in a sense, kind of creating, a chamber around, the person that you're working for. So a lot of what we saw during the first Trump administration was basically anyone that was willing to take the social capital risk of going to work for the president could get a job. And by and large, they were card-carrying Republicans, but they didn't actually agree with any of the things that the president had campaigned on. And so what a lot of these, junior people ended up doing was being the devil on the shoulder and whispering in the ear and saying, you really shouldn't, follow that order or that direction or X, Y, and Z. Right. And I think that's why you've seen such a change in pace in the first administration versus this administration is, the president actually deeply cares about the people that work for him. He recognizes that the stale establishment in DC failed him, and he has spent the last decade planning, emphasizing, and investing in the right people that were going to serve him this time. And so that's why the second administration has been a totally new ballgame, because it's all of these people under 30. And by the way, like in 10, 15 years, these people under 30 are going to be Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, X, Y, and Z. And so
They'll be boomers.
They'll be spiritual boomers. So right. So true.
Yeah, that's very well said. In fact, on that note, Jared, I mean, you have a hand in shaping young minds. You've got kids. You teach students. Are you optimistic about the Zoomers that you engage with every single day?
Oh yeah, super optimistic. I really am. And I mean that. I'm like a Zoomer at heart. I never liked, I don't know what's happening with the millennials. I don't, at least the chatter, I mean, this could be 5-10 years ago. Millennials were like known for like kind of being lazy or whatever, or not, that kind of thing. But then the fourth turning is here. I don't remember the author. When he's tracking generations, he puts the millennials as kind of like the hero generation. And I'm trying to map, like boomers have all the money, Zoomers have a lot of energy, a lot of go in DC. I'm wondering why the fourth turning guy put the millennials in that kind of position of like, I think it's mainly to do with just how generations work and where we're at. The millennials are going to be a little further along in their careers. They're going to have more connections, that kind of thing. Boomers have all the money. Is the boomer money when they die? Are they going to be handing that down to the millennials? But then the way that maps with that Zoomer spirit that we're talking about is very interesting to me. About just kind of, people are just, you can just go places, you can just do things. That whole thing. I think it's really good. Like we got a little phrase around here. Doug said this several times. I'd rather say "whoa" than "giddy up." Right? Like when you're looking at young men, you do not want to say "giddy up." Like that's not your thing. So give me guys that are. I remember the first time I talked to some of these guys in DC. They're like, man, some of these guys. I mean, they're waking. We're back to just like coffee and cigarettes for breakfast. We were just out there just. And
I did that for breakfast this morning.
Hey! I remember thinking, all right, go ahead then. Go ahead with yourself. Like let's go. I mean, if it's working for you, make sure you get a good lunch in. And but that kind of drivenness, I think, is great, and it's conservative. I mean, come on, it's now. So I'm always thinking about shepherding a flock, leading a flock, being aware of where the dangers are. But one of the fun things about being a dean is you need good pastoral instincts as dean. You can't be a school marm, you know what I mean? And you can't be totally just off the grid. But you have to be like, it's like coach, dad of middle-aged or older kids, that sentiment that gets like, we want you to go take shots, you know what I mean? I actually had a student go, they were like, so in passing, Dr. Longshore, with the 1st of April coming up, would there be any guidance on like what might not make a good, April Fool's Day joke? And I was like, pull the trigger. That's what you need to do. Like pull the trigger. Let's go. Let's go. You can ask forgiveness later. Don't ask permission. Like, what do you got?
I actually think it is worth saying, I've said this publicly before, but I think boomers get beat up on too much. I actually think Gen X is the worst generation, is my view. So the boomers, you said you're a millennial, right? That's fine? Okay.
Well, yeah.
So we're good. I haven't offended
Gen
anybody
Xers
at the
make
table.
me nervous, man. They're crazy. You know what I mean? They'll come with like a baseball bat and just beat your stuff down and just walk away.
So
they're pretty rugged.
So my general thesis for this is that, the boomers, yes, they have all the money and the wind was sort of at their back in terms of incentives, right? Like you had to build, we had a better economy, we had, a lot more actual productive jobs, et cetera. They had the wind at their back and they did something with it. And so I think a lot of that a lot of the things that the tangible and intangible things that they have were well earned. The negative qualities that they have, this sort of resistance to investing in their kids and grandkids, and sort of it's all about me, got passed on to the Gen Xers, but the Gen Xers are lazy. So it's like the worst of, in general, my parents are Gen Xers. I'm not speaking about my parents. They're actually close to millennials. They're like tail end of Gen Xers. But in general, like it was the worst attributes of the boomers got passed on to Gen X, and then they also have their own like neuroses about how much they hate their fathers and that sort of thing. So I think boomers totally fine. They got what they deserved, and the Gen Xers.
There's the new meme. Okay, Xers.
Yeah, okay, Xers. It's not as smooth. Not as smooth.
Yeah, that kind of like riffs off that colloquial meme that goes around all the time. Hard times create weak men. Weak men create, good times. Good times create. What is that?
Something like that.
Yeah,
something like that.
Good times.
Right. Weak men create hard times, and then hard times create strong men.
Yeah.
And so like there is this idea that we're coming out of this era of weaker men, weaker masculinity, and I'm super bullish on Gen Z. I think they're, obviously Exhibit A. You see this energy, you see a return back to great values. They see the failures that their parents and even their grandparents' generation saw. And there's real hope. Not that their hope is in themselves, but even this return back to a more orthodox Christianity, and a little bit of move away from evangelicalism, I think is all really positive signs for individuals just critical thinking. Could you speak on anything that you've seen as far as a vibe shift from a millennial? Because I grew up in an evangelical family and was raised in kind of like that post-Jesus movement type of climate. Are you seeing a bigger push? I've been reading about it. Could you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's there. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I grew up in a climate as a millennial where some of the lies of secularism were certainly still being sold, and in part could be bought by its recipients. Because I remember, growing up, and I was told kind of freedom, what constitutes you as a human is your ability to like choose your own path, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I'd be at the house and I'd be like, but why can't I get ice cream in the middle of the day? Like, I'd have these existential moments. It's like, the spirit of what I'm being taught all the time is that you can do this, but it actually never works. And I think the Zoomers there's no more fight. The Zoomers, it's just blatant secularism's dead. They know that freedom is not going to be found in some kind of self-actualization or some expression of my own identity, and they just know that's dead. So they're looking for hierarchy. They're looking for something otherworldly. This religion you mentioned. So there's the big trad Protestant, trad Catholic movement that's been going on recently. And I think all of that is really for the good, and it will have things that need to be fixed down the line. But right now, when you're on offense, pursue. Go ahead and go pedal to the metal for a while.
This is something that I spend a lot of time giving young guys advice on in DC when they start to kind of veer toward this this self-actualization. So say they get a job offer and they want to sit on it, for a week or two. It's like, I just need to think about it. And you start to talk to them and dig into it. And basically what it is it's imposter syndrome. They think that they're not, qualified to do that job, that they don't deserve it. And they're, navel gazing for some sort of self-actualization. Like, yeah, I'm actually the guy to do this job. Mm-hmm. And so the advice that I give to these guys all the time is, I hate to break the bad news to you, you never figure it out. It's never. Yeah. Your entire life as a man is constantly going to be, thinking and praying about these questions. And the only way out of the imposter syndrome is through.
Right.
You'll never remove the risk.
Yep.
So you think, am I up for the job? Even if you don't have the problems of the internal navel gazing, even if it's like an objective assessment, can I do that job? You should take a look at it. Like, are you fairly equipped for it? But it'll never be a perfect mathematical equation. You'll never be able to rid the risk of the opportunity, or rid the opportunity of the risk. You're just gonna have to go. I mean, that's a really good word, and I see more and more of that spirit. We do this with our sons. Good parenting. You have to be behind them and for them, no matter what they're doing. So you're pulling those 3-pointers and you've missed like 4 or 5. It's halftime. What do? Pull the trigger some more. You know what I mean? Like, what? But I've missed 4 or 5. Yeah, but you make 0% of the shots you never take. Yeah. You see? You just go out there and I'm talking about go. And if you get that going, that's how the great heroes have been made. They just you're gonna keep falling down, get back up, kind of thing.
On that point, I think we're gonna pause here for a little bit. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. There's gonna be a part 2 to this, and we're gonna continue our conversation from there. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.